Hello out there. My name is Laolu Akonde, and you are on to Inside Sources. And here is my take for today entitled Kanu Gumi Mamu and the Terrorists, a Nation's Contrasting Justice. As Nnamdi Kanu, the leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, IPOB, dilly-dallies some of the complexities of his terrorism case and the controversial national discourse that has ensued after that, it is essential for us to reflect on how it is that we got to this point as a people. The Nigeria of today is a nation where evil acts, outright violence, are being treated as a tolerable product of our differences, particularly religious, ethnic, and regional ones. The seeds of this self-inflicted and self-indicting predicament were sown long ago. But the present reality is perhaps the starkest that we have ever seen. Non-state actors who engage in extrajudicial terrorist violence are frequently treated with leniency, sometimes even without an arrest, let alone a prosecution. According to the Foundation for Investigative Journalism, FIJ, in a report on April 11, 2024, the Nigerian authorities have released 2,163 former Boko Haram terrorists in 9 years, with 390 more set to be freed as at that time. These individuals, according to the report, were described as repentant terrorists. They undergo a 6-month de-radicalization program and then reintegrated into society. This is how FIJ put it, and I quote, "These thousands who have engaged in acts of terror have found a path made by the government through which they can escape prosecution." End of quote. That is instructive. Similarly, Sheikh Ahmad Gumi, a prominent cleric known for negotiating with the terrorists in northern part of the country, reportedly warned the Nigerian military against actions that could undermine certain so-called peace deals that he has with terrorists. In a statement posted on Gumi's official Facebook, he said, and I quote, "Any attempt by security forces to engage the hardened Fulani terrorists risk plunging communities back into violence," unquote. To further drive home the point about some of these absurdities that we now see and tolerate, there was actually a meeting with the traditional rulers and community leaders in Faskari local government area in Katsina State, with several wanted terrorist leaders in attendance, including Ado Alero, a wanted kingpin. Alero, the Fulani terrorist kingpin, reportedly stated openly at that meeting that he increased the intensity of his attacks on various communities and armed forces after operatives of the State Security Agency arrested one of his members, unquote. He was saying this at the meeting. These quotes were reported by People's Chronicles on September 21, 2025. Now, Sheikh Gumi's stance and this kind of relationship with terrorists and bandits in the north continue to brew controversy, particularly given Sheikh Gumi's own history with negotiation and terrorists. Don't forget that Sheikh Gumi was recently deported from Saudi Arabia as a security threat, and he was barred from performing the Hajj pilgrimage ostensibly because of his pro-terrorist rhetoric and conduct. But here at home in Nigeria, it's a different story. What about the case of Bello Turji, who has been linked to numerous attacks on civilians and security personnel around the country? Despite being wanted by the authorities, Turji remains at large, and his actions continue to terrorize communities. On occasions, military onslaught against him have been perverted. All these circumstances, they raise questions about the effectiveness of our security agencies and the government's commitment to tackling terrorism and have an equal justice regime. Indeed, there are compelling questions about government strategy in dealing with terrorism. Are we prioritizing dialogue over prosecutorial justice, or is it a convoluted combination of both? The lack of clarity on the issue only adds to the confusion and frustration among Nigerians who demand equal rights and justice for all, regardless of ethnic, regional backgrounds, or social status, especially in the face of persistent insecurity and killings in our country. Now, against this backdrop, Nnamdi Kanu's situation appears to be a test of the overall national judicial system's integrity. While many Nigerians condemn Kanu's action, the selective application of justice is also glaring. In a redeeming instance, Tukru Mamu, an alleged terrorist negotiator, is undergoing trial. But this isolated case of Mamu only underscores the system's inconsistencies. It was Professor Wole Soyinka, the Nobel laureate, in a public lecture entitled "When is a Nation?", who argued that a nation is continually being forged through the collective actions and pursuit of justice by its inhabitants. Put differently, what the professor was trying to say is that the absence of justice is destructive to nation building. And that is what we must say again. It is a fundamental concern that we have a justice system that operates on different standards for different people. The disparity in treatment is not only limited to individuals, it extends to entire regions and communities. As Chinua Achebe once said, Nigeria is not a nation, it is a mere geographical expression. And he was echoing what Chief Obafemi Awolowo said in the 40s. These inconsistencies in justice and governance are a stark reminder that we still have a long way to go before we can truly call ourselves a nation. And so as we move forward, it is essential to address the root causes of all of these issues. We need to examine our justice system, our security architecture, and our societal values. We must ask ourselves, what kind of nation do we want to build? One where justice is blind, or one where it is selectively applied based on ethnicity, religion, or... The answers to these questions will determine the future of our nation and the fate of our citizens. Ultimately, Nigeria's survival as a nation depends on our ability to build a just and equitable society. We must strive for a justice system that is blind to ethnicity, religion, and social status, and that holds everyone accountable for their actions. Anything less than that is a betrayal of our collective aspiration for a better Nigeria. After all, Kanu, Gumi, Mamu, and the terrorists, and all of us, we live in the same country. And there you have it. Inside Sources will be right back. Welcome back to Inside Sources. Today, as we continue the conversation on the future of Nigeria, I have a very eminent Nigerian who is my guest today. He used to be a member of the Federal House of Representatives, ran for election in 2015, and was also the Director General of the Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency, NIMASA. And recently, he's been a social commentator, columnist, and author. I'd like to welcome, for the first time, to Inside Sources, Dr. Dakuku Peterside. I'd like to open the conversation in the normal way that I do. I'd like to ask you, Dr. Peterside, if you look at where we are today as a country, do you think our nation is heading in that direction of a great country, which many of us believe is the destiny of Nigeria?
Well, let me start by confessing that I'm an incurable optimist. Is our country headed in the right direction? The answer is no. We have a lot of dysfunctional systems. Do we have the ingredients of greatness? The answer is yes. We have a youth population. We have a huge population, which means a great market. We have enormous resources. And in addition, we're strategically located. But like you know, ingredients do not make good soup or stew on their own. You still need human capacity to transform ingredients to a good soup or a good stew. So that's our challenge today. We're an extremely endowed nation, but are we in the right direction? The answer is nowhere. We simply have a dysfunctional system which has led to a dysfunctional society.
All right. So, in your view, what are those key elements that we need to engage in order to go in the direction that you believe is the right one for our country? What are the key elements? Maybe 2 or 3, in your view.
All right. So if you ask me, I will capture it this way. There are 7 fundamental shifts that I have identified that if we make and put in place, we'll be on the path to greatness. And I'll just list those 7 and we'll discuss a few of them. First is the issue of leadership, and that's, for me, means governance. And when we talk about leadership, the challenge we have is the fact that we don't have credible and resilient institutions that could outlast our political and business actors. That's one. Now, 2 is the fact that we need to revisit our federal system. The current federal system will not give us the kind of outcome Nigerians desire. Nigerians desire to see a society that is stable, prosperous, and just. A society that works for everybody. We don't currently have a federal system that will guarantee that. Third is the fact that we need to fix security. And when we say security, it is beyond guns, it's beyond anything you can think of, material things. When we say security, it's multidimensional. Fixed economic security, social security, and indeed infrastructure security. So currently, our security system is dysfunctional. And if we can't secure the land and the people, we can't even talk of a society. Now, fourth is the economy. We need to fix the economy. And when we say we need to fix the economy, we need a system that the macroeconomic fundamentals are right. That's another one. Now, the other important thing that we need to fix is power. We need to literally power the nation. If we don't have stable and functional power, we cannot talk about a prosperous society. Now, power takes me to another issue, industrialization. Currently, we are exporting raw materials. As we're exporting raw materials, we're exporting jobs. As we're exporting jobs, we're exporting wealth. We need to stop exporting raw materials and start exporting value-added goods and services. That's another challenge we have. Now, it takes me again to another important thing. Because for you to actually industrialize, you must have human capacity in place. Human capacity means we must get our education right and healthcare right. These are the fundamentals that need to be in place for us to be on the path to greatness. Are they there? The answer is absolutely no.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. That very insightful analysis. And I made a note of those 7 things. And like you said, we're going to try and see how much of, digging deeper we can do. Let's start with leadership. Good a thing, you yourself, you've been inside and you've been outside. You have both perspective from the inside and from the outside. I wanted to ask you, so one of the challenges that I see in the way our leadership emerges is that we have a political system, and of course we're talking here of political leadership. We have a political system where merit, competence, and character has been significantly diminished in the way that leaders emerge. Now, if you share that view, how can we correct the errors in leadership? Or whichever way you want to take it, you don't have to go through my own example. But the challenges of leadership, I agree with you, is very fundamental. What is the way out?
All right, thank you very much. Now, for us to fix leadership, one critical thing that we need to do is to be deliberate about building credible and resilient institutions. That's something we don't have currently. And that leads us to the leadership recruitment process. Now, when we talk about credible and resilient institutions, I like to point out one is the electoral system. If we have an electoral system that produces leaders that don't reflect the will of the people, they owe the people nothing. They are not bound to perform. They are not bound to lead in such a way that it reflects the aspirations of the people. Now, related to that is the judiciary. If you have a judiciary that is compromised, a judiciary that completely do not deliver justice, then we can't talk about a fair and transparent system. Now, judiciary is a critical guardrail in democracy. If you have, as we currently experience, a democracy where if you approach the court, you can't be sure of justice, the highest bidder will most probably get justice. That's another challenge we currently face. Now, what of the party system? Our parties are not ideologically rooted, as you know. Not only are they not ideologically rooted, now these parties are simply vehicles, and they are not vehicles that convey anything to the people. So the people don't make a choice based on parties or candidates. In any case, do they really believe that their choices will matter? The answer is no. So we need to rebuild trust in leadership. As we rebuild trust, and to get us to the fundamentals, let's also re-engineer our leadership recruitment process. To re-engineer the leadership recruitment process, let's have a credible and transparent electoral process. Then, if we have a credible electoral process, the parties will put forward their best foot. That is not what we are currently experiencing. What we are currently experiencing is that godfathers who fund the parties, these parties that are not based on any ideology, impose candidates on us, and the choices before the Nigerian people are actually no choices. And even if when they make their choice, it doesn't reflect in the final vote. And because they don't have a key role to play in the choice of leaders, those leaders morally do not owe us anything. And so we have to deal with the electoral process. We have to deal with the judiciary. We have to deal with the policing system. Now, right now, if you commit a crime, there are no consequences for committing a crime. Because you know that it is easy to compromise the security system. When we have intelligence-led policing, when we have judiciary that is up and doing, that is credible, that will deliver justice, then you can be sure that there will be consequences for wrongdoing. That is at the root of the current leadership challenge we're facing. Now, the other institutions of the state are all dependent on this. Whether in the ministries, departments, and agencies, whether it's the legislative arm of government. Now, the legislators know that even if they make a bad law, they will not have consequences. They go back to their constituency and get re-elected because their governor is backing them. Somebody somewhere is backing them. So there are no consequences. But if legislators or parliamentarians are aware that the votes of the people will determine whether they will return to the legislature or not, they will make laws that reflect the aspirations of the people. They will take actions that will reflect the desire of the people. That is lacking. And so until we fix these leadership fundamentals, until we build credible and resilient institutions that will outlive the actors, then we're not started.
Okay, all right.
Transparency. So budgets are simply pieces of papers. Not that there is an intention to implement budget for the good of the people. Laws are made not because it will serve special interest, not because they want to serve the interest of the people. The ultimate, the long-term, the short, medium, and long-term interest of the people. These are things we need to address, and address them very fast. The rest of the world can't be waiting for us. They are not waiting for us. that are making progress. I'm sure you've heard that China is talking about 6G. Many other countries are talking about 6G. They've moved. We don't even have credible systems in place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, let's just, begin to dimension it even deeper. So it will seem, in my view, Dr. Peterside, that the question that we must address in trying to resolve the leadership crisis that we are in, that is going on, and by no means are we just talking about what is happening now. It's a cumulative challenge, over the years, especially, or particularly since 1999. It goes beyond that, but let's even focus on that. Where then are we supposed to take the first step to turn this thing around? I think, and then you will comment, it has to start with the kind of followers that we have. Because yes, leadership sets the standard, but what, in your view, is the role, the responsibility, the duties and obligations of followers? Somebody who has been my guest a number of times on Inside Sources is General Ishola Williams. And he argues that, look, this thing must go back to followership. That if we can get the followers right, they will make the demands on the leadership that they cannot run away from. What do you think, Dr. Peterside?
I agree with General Ishola Williams that followership has a fundamental role to play, complementary to the role of leadership. And I will explain that. In societies where you democratize education, you will have followership that will hold governments accountable. Societies where you have so many out-of-school children, education is not considered a fundamental human right. Then you have the kind of situation we're dealing with. And so there must be this complementarity between followership and leadership. And when I talk about that, the electoral system is designed in such a way that it is easy to compromise the process and throw up leaders that do not reflect the will of the people. I agreed that followership must go a step further. They will not only vote for the kind of leaders they want, they must ensure that their votes count. But for that to happen, we must up our game in the area of education and public enlightenment. Leaders of civil society must take this serious to invest their energy in mobilizing the people to understand the fundamentals of leadership and followership, the relationship, the tangential relationship between followers and leaders. That I agree with you completely. And so for me, followers have a role. Go and vote. Democracy can't start and end with voting. When you vote, hold your leaders accountable. Look at the budget, make demands, ensure that leaders take actions that reflect our aspirations. They have a role to play, but like I always say, leaders have a disproportionate role. The elite, we have not been able to achieve some level of elite consensus. Until we achieve some level of elite consensus, we will continue to shout and we will get little outcome. So I fundamentally agree with him that followers have a role to play, but leaders have even a more fundamental role to play. Let's fix our electoral system. Let's ensure that we democratize education. It's not enough. It is easy to make statements that we have free and fair, and compulsory education. What quality of education? How many persons have access to education? Let's give them education. If we give them education, they will make demands on the system. And it is for our long-term interest.
I agree also with you, about this point, that the leadership shouldn't just be mouthing some of these things. But the question I want to ask you is that, and this is coming out from some of the experiences that I have had inside government and outside government. The current set of political leaders, they don't have any incentive to change the way the game is played. And I'm sure you understand that.
Right.
They are cool with what is happening. So if we are depending on this set of leaders, for the most part, we have, of course, a handful of very good leaders, no doubt about that. But for the most part, those people that are in leadership who are in position to make this thing happen, they have no incentive at all to change the system. Shouldn't that then tell us that any changes that is going to come that will be fundamental must come from outside the federal capital, Abuja, outside the state capitals across the country, that it must come from the people? And going to your point about creating awareness and ensuring that the people have the basic knowledge of the power that they hold. Over to you, Doctor.
All right, thank you very much. We seem to be in alignment on the power of the people. I agree with you completely that the current set of leaders have no incentive whatsoever to change this dysfunctional system. And until the people own and drive the change, it will not happen. And I've consistently said that one way to get the people to drive the change is give them education, get them to understand the dynamics. Until they understand the dynamics, they won't do that. Civil society and leaders of civil society has a role in driving that process. What the people need is leadership. The people understand fundamentally that they need a change. They are desirous for a change. We can't continue like this. We are not competitive with our peers. We can't compete with our peers today. Today, despite our endowment, despite the fact that we have a large market, a youthful population, we are not a great country by any standard. We're endowed with enormous resources.
Why not?
And that to change that must come from outside. To come from outside means there must be some civil society leadership driving that. And for us to have that means there must be some degree of elite consensus that enough is enough. This is not working. We need to go a different route. We need to choose a different path. The economy is not cheer. There's nothing to cheer about the economy. We have talked about constitutional amendment, and there are divergent opinion that listen, the constitutional amendment won't give us the fundamental change we need, and that there need to be constitutional conference. I have a different opinion. I have an entirely different opinion on that. But the common thing that is opinion shared amongst all of us is that we need an elite consensus that the current system is not working. We need to follow a different path, and we need to do things differently. Whether it's in the federal system, we need to devolve powers to the states. And not only will we devolve powers to the states, we need to change our leadership recruitment process. The current democratic system is not working. And so all of these fundamentals, there has to be some consensus. Who will bail the cat? It's not enough. Public statements are easy to make.
Yeah.
Let our actions speak.
Yeah.
We can make comments and comments. We can talk and mouth and make statements. No, let's begin to put some of these things to action.
To action. And I agree with you, Dr. Peterside, that the civil society groups, must take the leadership. But in addition to that, one of the things that I think has to happen, which I am committed to, is to increase the level of civic awareness, to let the people understand.
And I've said so consistently.
The seriousness. Yeah, the seriousness of getting involved, and you have referred to it already. The seriousness of their getting involved in the electoral process, including getting to register to vote. And in my previous take last week, I said that the people must invade the electoral process. They must invade the voters' register. That means they must abandon the inconveniences that are involved in getting a voter's card and in voting and in ensuring that the votes count. I believe, Dr. Peterside, that if we have a critical mass of our people mobilized to get involved in the voting process, just starting by going out to register, I believe that it will send a compelling signal to the political elites. What do you think?
I agree, unfortunately, for reasons I cannot understand. The current opposition parties that ought to be involved in the mobilization of the people are either non-existent or suboptimally functional. This you know. If I ask you today, Laolu, the leading opposition political parties, it will be difficult to say. It will be difficult for you to say. Neither the People's Democratic Party, the All ADC, or any of those parties, the Labour Party, none of them can claim to be a major opposition party. We are not seeing signals, that they represent the opposition political party. So our parties are as dysfunctional as society itself or as government. They ought to lead in mobilizing the people, raising awareness, preparing the people for the next round of elections so that our people make a fundamental choice. That is not going on. Civil society, therefore, needs to step in. I agree with you. We need to mobilize a critical mass that will come out and vote. They will not only vote, they will secure their votes and ensure that their votes translate to electoral outcome. It is fundamental.
Yeah.
And the earlier we begin that process, the better. We're not going to leave that to the political parties since they have failed us. Mind you, I used to be an active politician, so I understand, the engineering that takes place that leads to the kind of outcomes we experience. But until the people own the electoral process, get involved, we mobilize a critical mass and get them to secure their votes, we're not going to experience any change. So that's very correct.
I agree with you absolutely.
I ordinarily expect that the opposition political parties will lead that charge, but that's not going on. Every society where you have had major shift, either the opposition parties in democracies, but where you don't have democracies, the ordinary people, market women, religious leaders. But in the current circumstance, it appears that most segments of civil society have been compromised. And they are now satisfied with peanuts, tokenism. But that can lead us to nowhere.
Interesting point. Let's wrap up on leadership by talking about the opposition. You have made quite a number of references to them. Now, one thing that I don't understand, for instance, with the recent defections that we have had, is that the people, those governors from Delta to Akwa Ibom and now Enugu and the rest, before now, they don't seem to learn any lesson from the guy who is now the president, who withstood this power of the center. And he wouldn't have been where he is today if he had behaved in the very cavalier, and in my mind, spineless way that many of these governors are behaving. What I want to ask you on that is that, why do you think those guys can't even see what is right in front of them? All of them are rushing to APC under Tinubu, but Tinubu was the man that withstood Obasanjo and built his opposition. Can you help us, Dr. Peterside? How come they are blinded to that reality?
All right. You've taken us through a historical trajectory of how the current president fought in the opposition and ultimately excelled. It is not that these governors are oblivious of the fact that you could stay in opposition and fight your way through. As I said in one of my columns, there are many issues beneath the surface. And until we look at what is beneath the surface, we will be looking at the wrong fundamentals. I don't think that that's an issue will discuss in such a simplistic manner as saying, look, oh, can't you guys look at historical antecedents and arrive at what is a fair decision? I think there are many other forces at play, which I am still trying to study. I don't believe that it's as simplistic as porting from one political party to the ruling party. There must be other issues. I'm trying to dig deep to find out what is happening beneath the surface. Until then, I've just gathered my own comments. What I know is that the opposition political parties have also not helped themselves, especially the People's Democratic Party. They are not organized. Look at the kind of price or sacrifice their founding fathers made. Today, the party is a shadow of itself. I believe that going forward, in no distant time, there may not be any governor left in the People's Democratic Party, at most maybe 2 or 3. We need to revisit what is going on. Our party system. It shouldn't be as worthless as it appears today. And because they're not built on any value system at all. So it's a roving door. As you get in, you get out. You get in tomorrow, you get out. You may be surprised that if, peradventure, any of the opposition parties come to power, these same human beings would jump on the board of the new political parties, and they'll be welcome. Now they're put on the frontier. So we're not built on any values. We're not built on any philosophy at all. That's one of the things fundamentally wrong with our practice of democracy. If we borrowed our current democratic practice from America or from the United Kingdom, where you have the flagship of parliamentary system, or America, where you have the flagship of liberal democracy, we should, yes, we can modify. But these ones, we are just not getting the fundamentals right at all. Like I said, our party system is as dysfunctional as society itself.
It is. To wrap it up and then move to something else, what is your assessment, while we're talking about leadership, of the 2 years and few months of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu?
Well, I've said that the president may have had noble intentions. I've said this consistently. However, that the ripple effect of his actions has truly hurt Nigerian people. Whether it's the removal of subsidy, it has had unintended consequences. Whether it's the foreign exchange regime, it has had unintended consequences, and they are there for all of us to see. Look at inflation. Look at poverty rate. Look at hunger level in society. These are all unintended, I presume so, unintended consequences of some decisions we made. Please, can we re-examine our approach to the management of the economy? There's nothing to cheer about currently. And until that is done, Nigerians are hurting. Let's not take our silence for granted. That's my own candid opinion.
All right. So let's move to federalism. And I'd like to open that discussion this way. It's a bit of my own observation of how our current president is managing some of those things. Clearly, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is that leader, or was that leader, who advocated for true federalism, restructuring of the country. And in his 2 years in office, he has made some moves. For instance, he has changed the tax regime in a very progressive way. And when he had an opposition, even from an institution of government, that is the National Economic Council, when the governor said, look, Mr. President, take away this bill, the man came out and said, no, you guys sort it out in the parliament. And ultimately, there was some consensus. By January next year, by the grace of God, we're going to be getting into that field. Now, the reason why I brought that example is that I don't see that same kind of commitment, resolve, and determination on the part of the president on issues of federalism, including state police. He continues to say, that's Mr. President, that, oh yes, we're going to have state police. But I don't see him being bullish like he was positively on the question of tax reform. And so as we segue into federalism, do you think that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu ought to give the issue of the restructuring of this country a priority or not?
My answer is in the affirmative. I think that based on the manifesto of the All Progressives Congress, the issue of the bargain of the federal system ought to occupy the front burner of government agenda. That is not happening. But we must admit that both the party and the president has admitted that restructuring, or in whatever name so called, however designated, is something that must be done. You've heard the governors themselves advocate for state police. You've heard the governors also ask that more power should be devolved to the states, because states are centers of production. Currently, our society is not optimally productive. We are a consumption economy. If we want to unlock innovation, it is to devolve more power to the states. All states are endowed one way or the other. They are the centers of productivity. That way, there will be healthy competition among the states. They will produce more. But for as long as we depend on handouts from the center, at the end of every month, we go for what is called jack meeting, or a fact meeting rather, so that resources coming from either a particular part of the country are shared. That way, there will be no incentive to work hard. There will be no incentive to innovate. There will be nothing, no incentive to do anything whatsoever. And to that extent, I believe, and relying on APC manifesto and the president's personal position over the years, the issue of restructuring ought to occupy a frontline position on government agenda. That is not happening. So to that extent, I agree with you. Government under President Tinubu can afford to be bullish to restructure the country, to make it more productive. There is nothing to be afraid about restructuring. The word simply means a change in the way we are structured so that we'll be more productive, and not for us to continue in the consumption mentality that we currently have.
Thank you. Thank you. So still on institutions, you had said in some of your earlier remarks about the importance of institutions, and you did mention the judiciary. I wanted to ask you, also because you are from Rivers State, you ran for governor of Rivers State in 2015. You were a commissioner in Rivers State. You actually started your public service career in Rivers State. The Supreme Court has reserved judgment in the case of the president's exercise of his emergency powers that suspended the governor and the House of Assembly in Rivers State. But the matter went to court, and the Supreme Court did not consider it, at least to our public knowledge, until we had news recently that, oh yes, the Supreme Court now has reserved the judgment. But the emergency has elapsed. What do you think is going on in that way? What has happened that the judiciary could not deal with the matter urgently as it was demanded before the expiration of the emergency?
We must all agree that Nigerians have reservation about the judiciary. You've heard Sultan of Sokoto express his concern. You've heard, and that's the revered Sultan of Sokoto, you've heard former President Goodluck Jonathan express his reservation. You've heard Obi Ezekwesili express his reservation. And you've heard many other persons speak at the last MBA conference at Enugu. former Vice President, the revered Yemi Osibanjo, His Excellency Yemi Osibanjo, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Professor of Law, had in 2017, as far back as 2017, commented about the Nigerian judiciary and how lawyers have a fundamental role to ensure that judiciary works for everybody and people have confidence in judiciary. So there's nothing new, about the fact that there appears to be trust issues between Nigerian people and judiciary. Now, on the specific issue of Rivers State, that has put a further dent on the judiciary. However, it will still give us value for us to have a position by the Supreme Court of Nigeria on the exercise of the powers of the president with respect to emergency rule. So to that extent, we look forward to whatever is their position. The fact that they were not able to deliver judgment at the appropriate time is enough reason for concern. But however, we still want to hear them out. Let's know the position of the law. For now, the only other place you can appeal to is heaven. So, for as long as we practice democracy and we're still on earth here, let's hear the position of the Supreme Court of Nigeria. Let them make let them make their position known.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree because it's something to look forward to. We wish that it had been done before, but at least better late than never. Let's begin to we have just about 10 minutes left, so let's begin to wrap it up. I wanted to follow up on the issue of elite consensus, because this is also one of the things that we have tried to talk about a lot on Inside Sources. And it's a very simple proposition that it is in the interest, I'll make a comment and then you will react, Dr. Peterside, that it will seem that we need to talk to the Nigerian political elite that trying to save the day, trying to prevent, a worsening of the fortunes of our country is in their best interest. It was Chief Obafemi Awolowo that said that if you don't take care of the children of the poor,
the
children of the poor, they will ensure that you and your own children that you are rich cannot sleep. And that goes to the issue that all of the Nigerian elites, not only political, religious leaders, traditional rulers, business leaders, thought leaders, and politicians, every sector that matters, it's important for them in their own interest to develop a consensus that is not based on politics, not based on ethnicity, not based on religion or region or any other thing that divides us. Just to say, this is the minimum that we should be conducting, the way we should be conducting business in Nigeria. And you talked about it about twice, so I thought that we should talk about it a little bit more, because it seems to me that it's in their enlightened best interest. But we are not seeing any kind of traction even on that, Dr. Peterside.
All right, thank you very much. Like I said earlier, leaders who understand the complexities of our society. I'm not seeing too many leaders play that role. And in my book, Leading in a Storm, a whole chapter was devoted to sense making. And it's about gathering of diverse and disparate information, bringing them to a coherent narrative. Now, if you follow that trajectory, what we currently have are leaders who don't understand the complexities of the system, how a functional, resilient, and credible institution will work for their own ultimate good, how building human capacity will serve their ultimate interest, so that we can say, can we ensure that all our people get quality education that is globally competitive? How do we get the elite to understand that is in their best interest to choose leaders in such a way that will get credible leaders who can execute. Let execution not be dependent on luck. How do we get leaders, the elite, to understand that public policy shouldn't be by accident? Let public policy be formulated to address challenges in such a way that it doesn't matter who the actor is at any point in time, who the actors are at any point in time. I've been teaching public policy forever, and that governments at various levels just wake up and make public policy pronouncements. They don't put a thought to it. How do we ensure that, look, the economy must move in a particular direction to work for all of us? Not because we want to take advantage of loopholes in the economy, of the macroeconomic and microeconomic fundamentals at a point in time, not knowing that tomorrow these same fundamentals will work against us. You see, until they understand the linkages between one thing and the other, we're not going to arrive at that elite consensus. So for us to arrive at that elite consensus is for us to agree on the irreducible minimum that is acceptable to us as a society. Leaders have a fundamental role to play in that. It's not enough for us to say those that occupy offices. No, they are not a representation of who we are. They may be occupying office at a point in time, taking advantage of dysfunctional electoral system. They are not the true reflection of who we are. They are smart. We are smart people. We are endowed people. So leadership is not only when you occupy office. In your business, in your community, in your local government, we have leaders. Let them step forward and do what they are called to do. Lead. Let's build some consensus on the irreducible minimum that is acceptable to us, whether by conduct, whether the level of competence we expect those who will play leadership role must have. Let's turn our diversity to strength. Let's turn our scale to capability. Let's turn our strategic location to an advantage. Until we do that, we will continue to mount a great nation, giant of Africa, with nothing to show for it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. One last question, and then we'll wrap up. Electoral reforms. I want you to discuss very quickly what are the more important priorities or the things that you think ought to change in order to free up our electoral system. Is it electronic transmission? You know, recently the National Assembly is talking about shifting the blame. I think the Senate actually passed that, shifting the burden of proof to INEC. I wanted to talk about one or two key critical reforms that can help us, you know, to move closer to a true democracy in our country. As we wrap up, Dr. Peterside.
But first, for me to point out that I'm disappointed that the National Assembly has not prioritized electoral reforms. That I must say and say it very loud and clear. I'm totally disappointed. I'm sure that most Nigerians are disappointed. From what we have read, what we've monitored, they've not prioritized electoral reforms at all. On the fundamental changes that we expect, one is that I'll be very glad to see burden of proof shifted to INEC because it's important, it's critical. Now, two is the fact of electronic transmission of results. Three is the issue of, surprisingly, you'll be shocked, that it's not enough for us to have electronic accreditation. The argument has been that it's not backed by law. It is only
a regulation.
A regulation by INEC. Can we codify it that there's no alternative to electronic accreditation. So if I arrive at a polling booth and I put my thumb to be accredited, anybody throughout the electoral value chain will see it, that only 3 persons are accredited to vote here. And as we are voting, can we also track it that 3 persons voted here? And that these 3 persons who voted here, this is the way they voted. It may not tie to individuals. So the issue of deployment of a technology in the electoral process is very critical. If I see these 3 changes, then I know that we have commenced the process of credible, free, fair, and transparent election. But without this, we're still jokers.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dakuku Peterside. Time is not on our side. We would have covered a lot more ground, but thank you so much for your contributions. Thank you for your voice. I noticed that lately you have taken the center stage in trying to speak to some of these very important issues for our national development. And thank you also for coming to Inside Sources.
Thank you very much. Lolu, get hold of my book, Beneath the Surface. All of these things are captured in Beneath the Surface. Get hold of Leading in the Storm. One thing is that it's time to speak up for the country. Not for today, for generations yet unborn. History will be kind to us for as long as we muster the courage to speak up. Speak the truth. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I will certainly get your 2 books, Beneath the Surface and Leading in a Storm, that you just recently released. I'll get those 2 books and read them. Thank you so much.
There are all major bookshops in Nigeria.
Yeah, you have it. Okay, good. Thank you so much. And there you have it, another edition of Inside Sources. Like we always say, Nigeria will prevail. Nigeria will prevail means that Nigeria will win, because partly we will continue to highlight the major issues and will bring the voices that are speaking to the future of Nigeria in that great sense that we all believe. My name is Laulu Akonde. Thank you for watching, and by the grace of God, I'll see you at the next edition.